Bhagwat Vishwakarma, Deputy Director General, DDG, USOL. Magnus Everbring, CTO, APAC. Tarun Chatkara, Vice President, Regulatory, Bharti Airtel. Ashwini Khilan, COO, Altius. And I would also like to invite Harshad Joshi, Manager, Customer Solution Engineering and Transceiver, Herbert and Shillong. And at last, please join me in welcoming Sonika Bajaj, Partner Markets, as moderator from KPMG India. Over to you, Sonika.
Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, a big thanks to IMC, COI, DOT and Ministry of Communications for organizing this fantastic session yet again. On behalf of my esteemed panel over here, I would like to thank IMC for this opportunity to put together such a fantastic panel over here to brainstorm on how digital infrastructure is evolving in India, and specifically in light of AI. How do we scale new heights to ensure that AI is penetrated at every corner of India. So. As we all know, we've made big strides. India's made big strides in digital infrastructure. We've from rural connectivity to the number of towers, 5G connectivity. All of those have been made possible because of the digital infrastructure. But with AI redefining and rewriting the rules, what has been planned may not be sufficient for future. And that's where we've got this panel over here to kind of discuss what are the key gaps that we see in terms of digital infrastructure that need to be kind of fulfilled to make sure AI is proliferated to the rural India, to the entire masses. And maybe to start off with this conversation, I'll start with Mr. Vishwakarma. Given the fantastic achievements that we've made in digital infrastructure so far, would be great if you can maybe throw some insights from government perspective on what are the key recent initiatives that you guys have taken, and specifically with the focus of AI. What's the government's vision to make our digital infrastructure AI ready?
Good afternoon, everybody. India has made tremendous progress in the digital infrastructure setup in past, especially in last 10 years. So the government licensees who are operating various telecom services have been expanding their network quite rapidly. But from government side, we felt that there are certain pockets, especially in rural areas and the areas like Northeast and the islands, where we need connectivity, but the investment required in it are not going to come from private side. So government formed the Digital Bharat Nidhi, which is basically earlier, which was known as USOF. From this fund, we put up some projects to provide connectivity to these. Like for islands, we have laid submarine cable from Chennai to Andaman, similarly from Kochi to Lakshadweep. And on that submarine cable, private operators are having bandwidth for running their services. Similarly, for Northeast and other remote and rural areas, we have made up various 4G mobile projects. Nearly 50,000 crore rupees of projects have been approved in last 10 years, which are being implemented by BSNL, Airtel and Jio. So under these projects, about 28,000 villages are already covered by way of nearly 19,000 towers, which our Honorable PM dedicated to the nation in the last month, September itself. And still work for another 10 to 12,000 villages is going on. So that way government is supporting the industry by way of investing from BBN funding, so that these areas which are not techno-commercial viable for them. So people living in those areas, they can also get the telecom connectivity. which is the basic need for running AI related apps or anything which is required for software side.
Perfect. I think both the public and the private sector have been working in perfect harmony so far to kind of achieve such a brilliant outcome that we've achieved. Moving on, since we've heard the government's perspective, maybe Tarun, my next question is to you. Given the AI infrastructure will have different requirements. For example, the compute power, the edge capability. So from that perspective, what do you think will be the foundation infrastructure that is needed for AI for rural penetration?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So if you go a few years back, you will realize that when all telcos launched the 4G services, after that the digital revolution came. You pick up the e-commerce, you want to bring anything at homes, you use the apps and all this. So today the entire digital infrastructure is relying on the telecom infrastructure. So as a telcos, what we have done it, we have invested significantly in creating the infrastructure, especially in the rural areas. We have taken the help from the USO fund to build up the sites. We have built up our own sites. We have created huge capacity. We have bought the spectrum, thousands of crores. So today we are, as a telco, we are able to roll out one of the best telecom services across the country. And if you compare it, over the last 2 years, the Indian telcos have rolled out one of the fastest 5G network in the country. Now, the basic layer is already available about that. So today, even as a telcos, we are investing significantly in the AI. And in fact, if you go to the Airtel booth, half of the use cases you will see that is somehow linked with the AI. So if you see over the last 1 year, we have launched the Airtel spam product basically, which is making a significant difference basically in every consumer's who remains Airtel customer. We are using the AI to optimize our networks basically. Like for examples, based on the site usage patterns, I'm able to save the electricity. We are using AI platform to give the better services to our customers. We have, one of the largest, data centers in the countries where we are extensively AI to, how to move to the green technology. And we continue to invest in that. So every year we are investing in the spectrum, in the infrastructures. Thousands of crores are being spent. So as far as the network part is concerned, I think we have created that sort of things. But I'm sure that the way the digital infrastructure during the 4G regimes basically picked up, the AI is also picked up. The basic layer is theirs. Now the startups have to come, so the other entities come. That how to use that infrastructure is basically to proliferate AI services. Thank you.
Tarun, and specifically, I think organizations like yours who have got such deep rural connects, using your infrastructure, the tower infrastructure, the data center infrastructure to create edge capabilities, I think that will go a long way in AI proliferation. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, Magnus, just maybe learning from your global experience, just wanted to understand how globally, how are organizations and governments and countries transforming their digital infrastructure to become AI ready? Any insights on what has worked, what hasn't, which maybe India can emulate?
Okay, so yeah, how can AI help in helping people in daily lives? I think without a shadow of a doubt, AI is there and its impact will even increase over time. And that goes for any part of society. People who are less educated will have great help to gather information and solve the issues, as will people with lots of knowledge. So it will be a truly strong component in gathering and using information for individuals. Then how can we make it as well accessible as possible? Well, from our point of view then, I think there are 3 technologies that are now really merging in that aspect. It is AI, it's cloud compute, and it's the mobile networks. AI has its evolution, how we will support applications of different kinds, but it will need to rely on very heavy compute platforms, which will be on the network side. Then we need to access those compute platforms. And people tend to be out and about, they tend to move. So we will be argued through the mobile networks. And even more so since I think the smartphone penetration is considerably higher than the PC penetration. So it's ever more important to make sure the mobile networks are there and they truly can deliver on the merits on the AI-based applications. And indeed, that's something that Ericsson works hard with, work very much to make sure that whatever the AI-based workload application there is now and in the future, the networks can carry that load with the best kind of performance. And the technology part there is a good challenge. Information will be carried in a large extent from the device to the network. There will be what we call uplink heavy. And that is a challenge. Why so? While your device is power limited, it's also limited from the capacity of your battery. And therefore, we need to make sure that the networks are even more potent to detect these signals. So we're already having extensive programs on that. And of course, looking forward then some years down the line as 6G starts to emerge, how we can make that standard native from the beginning to carry AI loads. Then just to conclude, there's another part also, and that's how we use AI inside our networks and how we use AI to operate the networks. And that is, of course, very important for us. We use AI to run optimization of information, boosting performance, spectral efficiency, etc. And we use AI to make sure that operating a system becomes more and more autonomous, that is to say, more cost effective to manage all the data that's coming along.
Thanks, Magnus. I completely agree. I think our networks need to be AI-fied, if I may use that word, to make sure to carry the AI applications that our rural India requires. So completely agree over there. Harshit, if I may move to you, last mile connectivity has a big role in making sure some of these AI applications reaches the masses. So, I mean, if you can maybe help us understand what have been some innovations that can help the last mile connectivity being improved further.
Good afternoon, everyone. And firstly, I would like to focus on why last mile connectivity is such an important topic. Because this decade doesn't belong to India, or not the next decade, but the century. So to unlock that potential, we need to unlock that potential from the rural India, because majority of our population is there, and we don't need the vertical development. We need the horizontal development, and it's not just the economic development, but also the social development, because the inclusion of all these people is so necessary. They are part of us. I mean, they are part of India, and it's very crucial to include them in this growth story. And to include them in this growth story, we need the last mile connectivity. And last mile connectivity in a country like India, which has such huge geography and with such difficult terrains like mountains, and you have deserts, you have rainforests, is not an easy task, and it cannot be done with a single solution. So that's why the hybrid approach, which is the fiber, wireless, and you have SATCOM now being introduced, is key to this last mile connectivity. And this recent government initiative, which is the BharatNet, in various phases has been the key initiative. And I would like to appreciate the recent phase, which has completely adapted to this ring topology and the IP-MPLS protocols, which makes it more resilient and also low latency. So these are some of the innovations that I have really appreciated. And I think there's more to it, and we'll see a lot towards this direction. Thank you. Yep.
Thanks, Harshit. Ashwini, if I may move on to you, towers have played a critical role in laying down the telecom infrastructure and achieving the 4G and the 5G penetration that we've achieved in the country. But now with that we're talking about AI-related things, what kind of policy framework interventions or changes do you think are needed to ensure that the tower infrastructure remains strong and further grows?
Good afternoon, everybody. So, first of all, I agree with all my panelists, that India has done so much in digital infrastructure in last 10 years, So today, as a country, we have, more than 800,000 towers, if we talk about towers only, So, and all this has been possible by, positive policy initiatives from government side, plus, investments from all the private parties. So it has always been a joint effort which has seen so much success over last, particularly in last 10, 12 years, when this whole, the data revolution has come, and all these applications like UPI and everything, So now, earlier, the towers or the mobile phones were used for only voice communication, but today, I think voice communication is the least needed, You need mobile phones for so many other things. And yes, by the way, I also need it for voice communication. So that's the situation now. So as you see, for any infrastructure, the one thing is reality. The more infrastructure you build, the more need for infrastructures comes up. It's true for roads, it's true for power, it's true for our digital infrastructures also. Okay. So today, we are standing at a level where our each subscriber on an average is using about, let's say, close to 30 GB per month. Okay. 5-6 years back, it was like, 10 GB, so it has gone, kind of multiple times. And, the way we are looking at AI or the rural penetration, and where we understand that, our country is all rural based, and, the heart of India lives in rural. Okay. So, this thing is going to go another, 3-4 times levels, so this is possible with all these applications coming. You are talking about edge computing and all, when the, we are going closer to the consumer from a compute standpoint. So I think all the policy initiatives that we have taken, they need to be further, it needs to be fastened up to, meet the needs of, all these challenging and exciting things that are coming our way. And if I may, try to, look at the top few these things, so much work has been done on ROWs, so there have been the policies, the government has been issuing policies to make it uniform across the, this thing. But again, as I said, more you do, more you need, so it can further be simplified. It can further be, made, friendly to the infrastructure providers. So one is the ROW policy. The other, specifically when we talk about the, infrastructure in the rural areas, and, as, all panelists, Tarun also said, and Sir also said that, in the rural there is a digital divide. So we can look at, some tax, kind of GST, benefits on particularly on rural infrastructure. Okay, then, one thing which has always eluded our sector, the digital infrastructure sector, is that the real infrastructure status, the way it is given to the transport infrastructure or to the power infrastructure. Okay, because we are kind of, new babies in the infrastructure world, so we have never been, kind of given that, status. So if that can be given, that can help us, and more than anything else, more you do go rural into the, kind of country, the requirements of, grid availability and all those kind of things. So this infrastructure, not only to be treated as an infrastructure from a, kind of a financial and banking standpoint, but also from an essential service standpoint, so we have to make our, kind of regulations or rules in a way that, everybody understands that, the towers or any digital infrastructure, tower, fiber, or any digital infrastructure is as critical as a road or as a, kind of power infrastructure. So they need to be brought at that parity so that, we are ready for the next level of explosion in, and then when we talk about all these AI, which is so much potential to change the life of the people, which we have seen in the last 1 decade or last 2 decades, how much change this digital infrastructure has brought to the life of the consumer. So if we want to see it continuously happening, so these are some of the things as a country, as a industry, we need to look at and introspect and do what is best suited for the country.
Luckily, we've got Mr. Vishwakarma here with us. So hopefully all the recommendations that you're making will be soon be, I'm sure the government is considering and is aware of these requirements. But John, moving on, again, leveraging your global experience, wanted to understand, how is mobile infrastructure getting reformed, and specifically to make, where are you seeing the most traction in terms of AI use cases when we talk about rural adoption?
Thank you so much. Well, firstly, it's a pleasure to be here at IMC, and just as sort of an outside observer, having been coming to India yearly for many years, the development in mobile and connectivity and the entire ecosystem is really exceptional. And I think it is the perfect example of when you match government ambition and policy with industry scale and investment. And I think we're seeing that here in India. And I think one of the important things when you talked about, of course, mobile connectivity, of course, GSMA is about the mobile industry. 84% of connections to the internet are over mobile. So if you're going to have AI or any other solution that comes over a network, you have to remember that a large number of the people are going to access that over a mobile network. And I think what's really compelling here in India is the degree to which the investment has gone into expanding coverage. As an industry globally, I should note, it's been remarkable. We saw a drop from, in 2015, we had a coverage gap, so 19% of the population not covered by a mobile network in 2015. Globally now, it is 4%. So that's, just 10 years' time, that is an incredible achievement and an incredible amount of investment. And in India, it is 1% of the population. Now, obviously, in India, 1% of the population is a large number of people, and it must be tackled. But I think when we're talking about AI, often we're looking at the sort of splashy things you see in the headlines and large enterprise applications. But I think we need to remember that AI is going to cut across everything. It's going to cut across the way operators are doing their business and becoming efficient. But it's also going to impact the services that all types of people are accessing and using. And I think particularly, I know a big focus in this country has been around making sure that everyone has opportunity and access. And of course, that includes the large rural populations. So some areas that we've seen real progress, I think, particularly in India, but you can also look at use cases elsewhere, is education, making education more accessible. So offering personalized learning experiences to students in areas that would otherwise not have access and be underserved in many ways. Improving healthcare. Getting to see healthcare experts at times would be very difficult even in an urban area. But by enabling medical diagnostics in remote areas using specialists in AI remotely, huge opportunity, and we are seeing that already. And I think also we shouldn't forget the importance in a huge number of countries of agriculture. And I think here in India, smart agriculture, providing farmers with real-time information, weather patterns, new farming techniques, pests, et cetera. And I think we're already seeing Indian mobile operators engaging in this area. If we look at Reliance Jio, I know they've developed an IoT device that uses AI to help farmers detect crop disease and then to recommend treatment. So, a huge part of their revenue depends on the success of their crops, and anything we can do to improve that will be useful. I know Bharti Airtel has partnered with the hospital group to develop a solution that uses AI image processing to support doctors in cancer screenings. So these are just a few examples, but they're real-life examples that even if you help one person or save one person's life, it's an achievement. But given the scale of the issue and the scale of the reach of the infrastructure in India, I just think it's an example that we can take beyond the borders here and rely, I think, very importantly, on the scale of the solutions developed here to export them to places where maybe they don't have the same level of scale.
Brilliant. And I think these are very apt use cases, and specifically from a rural context, I think they can make significant difference to our rural state currently and help in achieving what the Prime Minister's envision of Digital Bharat. So very well said, John, over there. Maybe, Mr. Vishwakarma, if I may move back to you, given all the interest that we're seeing and so much activity happening in the private sector, how do you see the government supporting the private sector in encouraging, because while government is doing its bit, I think the private sector also needs to ramp up. And so how do you see government support in terms of policy changes and some of the other areas where you think government can support the private sector?
Thanks. Actually, government has been listening to TSP's demands, their issues quite proactively during last few years that I have seen, and we have been trying to solve their issues as far as possible. One of the example is the 5G rollout, which has happened very fast and very swiftly. We are now almost 100%, all districts are covered, barring one or two. There are more than 5 lakh BTSs installed and more than 250 million customers in it. Major issue was their right-of-way permissions and tower permissions from the state government that DOT has taken up with the state governments, and in last few years those permissions have become very easy to get. There are online ROW portals. In the new license regime Telecom Act 2023, DOT is coming up with a modernized authorization framework for giving licenses. So all licenses will be combined, all kind of authorization will form part of one license. And then there are certain more modification in ROW policy also. The state and UTs now have come on board in this new ROW policy. So in this, there is even a provision for automatic approvals. Suppose a state does not give a ROW permission within some stipulated time, say 1 month or so, permission is deemed to have granted. And tower permissions also, their charges also, they have come reasonably to a reasonable levels. So that way we are trying to support our, they are ultimately government and TSP and all operators. Our aim is single, to provide best and connectivity to all our citizens.
Absolutely. Tarun, if I may, address a big elephant in the room. So financial feasibility has always been a challenge when we talk about rural digital infrastructure. So what could be the potential financial models that can maybe the government can consider, or that can emerge, that can help proliferate some of the digital infrastructure in rural areas?
First of all, one thing is very important is that creating the telecom infrastructure in the rural area is not an easy task because of various reasons. I just give an example, and Sir is aware about it because we have signed some USO agreements with DOT. So let's say that as an Airtel, we have built around 3,500 sites in the rural areas. To approach those sites, actually, as an Airtel, from our own pocket, we have built around 750 kilometer roads. Because there is no approachable road, we have to build the infrastructures. So in the northeast, when we did that, actually, we were not creating the telecom infrastructure. We were bringing the electricity in the villages, and we were paying to the state electricity boards. And similarly, we are creating approximately 3,000 kilometer worth of fibers, basically, to connect those sites. So it's not a very easy task when you are building the rural infrastructure. And the second is that when you build up the infrastructure, the cost is very, very high, but the usage is hardly there. It's like for the USOs, we have built up the sites in those villages where there are only 2-3 families. But as a national policy, you have to give the telecom connectivity to those customers as well. So a lot can be done, by the government, and in fact, a lot has already been done, but they'll mange more. Is that like for example, in the USO fund, the operators are contributing 5% of their revenue. So approximately 70,000 crores are already sitting, which remains to be utilized. But I continue to pay 5%. to that. So whether we can have a mechanism where I can access that funds to create the rural infrastructures very quickly, because if I get an access to those funds very quickly, it makes it reduce my cost. The another cost which remains very high is the right of way. So let's take an example. In some of the places, when we want to build up the sites in the forest, the ask is around to pay 10 to 15 lakh rupees per site. So now there is hardly any traffic there, but the person is asking for such a money. Whereas when all the state government have signed the contracts with the BBNL, that they don't charge the right of way, because it is BBNL infrastructure is considered as a national infrastructure. The similar, I think, benefit you can give it to the telcos also who are giving to the rural areas. Why I'm being subjected to the right of way charges, or whether we can create some sort of a mechanism where the same money is going from the USO funds, or whether you can reduce the USO levy from, let's say, that 5% to a certain percentage, or whether we can have a mechanism where unless you utilize the entire corpus which is already available with you, you don't charge me, because it will reduce my cost to serve the rural areas. Today, if I pay 5%, 45% of my customers are sitting in the rural areas who are paying to fund the USO, basically subsidies and other things. Other things, is the backhaul. Like, satellites remains a huge cost, because it is not very easy to connect the backhaul, when you're creating the telecom infrastructure. Satellite is a very expensive proposition, whether we can have some sort of funds. Or the backhaul where, the government has done a wonderful job, where today they are not charging for the excess spectrum. But the backhaul spectrums, the cost of the backhaul spectrums remains very high. TRA has already issued a consultation on paper that, and the entire industry has said that you please reduce the cost. Or whether we can have some sort of a mechanism where, when you are using the backhaul spectrum for the rural areas, that comes at a nominal price. Or the BBNL infrastructure which has been created with the public funds, when as a TSP, I, utilize that infrastructure, the pricing maybe can be the nominals and all. So there are various models. Or the last thing is that one is the fund which is lying. The second, how easily and quickly I can access that funds. So today, if as an operator, whether I have an opportunity where I say that, or the government comes say that this is the area, rural area where I want to cover it, but it doesn't make any business sense for me. Can you give me the USO subsidy? Today there is no mechanism, because there would be a tender, which will take another 1 year, 1.5 years. Whether we can have that sort of a mechanisms where the moment I say that I want to build up the rural infrastructure and nobody's there, then I can access the funds immediately. That's all for myself. Thank you.
I hope Mr. Vishwakarma is listening to all these requests. You should have been looking there and giving him the feedback. Magnus, again, dipping into your global experience, how have you seen 5G and broadband kind of elevate the rural transformation? If you can maybe share your experience on how rural areas have benefited and how can it be fast-tracked?
So, and to cover more people. Yeah, okay. So, there are many angles to this. I think I'd like to look at it from the view of government, from mobile operators, and of course how we can supply and support them, and then from the users, consumers or enterprise point of view. Now, it practically, of course, you have to ask yourself a little bit, how long does it take to build a wall of bricks? It takes a long time. It's an enormous operation to build a national coverage network. In 5G in the world, we're over 50% population coverage. In a few years, we'll be over 90 and so forth. But however far we've gone, we can always do more. And the further out we go, we need to think of how to really bridge that lost gap. Now, if you look on the government side, there are many aspects there. In every country, there is a local discussion on availability of spectrum and the cost associated with it. Mobile operators think it's very high. That discussion has certainly been here in India. Now, what should be the view on spectrum that supports the people on the very rural side? Can that be a different way of licensing that spectrum? Can be considered. Also, I think what's the possibilities to build a radio site out in rural areas? How can that be made easier with right of access? providing power, providing backhaul. There's a number of things where the public side can look at how to lower the bar for that kind of private investment to go there. Then, as the mobile operators builds the network, of course, we have a big responsibility to make sure that the network can perform well and be, in a sense, a sparse network. That is to say, it needs to have a long range. We have practical sites in commercial networks that operate with up to 200 kilometers cell range. That's phenomenal. That is, of course, with a caveat, under very good geographical conditions, very high antenna placement to overcome the curvature of the earth, and over salty water, covering coastal areas. If it is inland with mountains, of course, the range has to go down due to physics. But what I'm saying here, the radio gear with standard devices and the network equipment can consider considerable range, given that it's cost effective to build it there. Then lastly, it's also a matter of the ecosystem for the devices. And I think some local statistics here in the second quarter this year, the lowest tier, the 90 to 110 US dollar segment for smartphone sales increased by 600% year on year. Phenomenal growth. The top tier went down year on year. So what that tells me is that now the maturity in the chipset industry and the scale of it is so large so that prices drop and is now well below 100 US dollars. That drives, of course, the urge from people to use it. And that also makes 5G more relevant for the rural areas. So I think a number of things goes hand in hand here. But again, how can the government side make sure there are lower frequencies available at a palatable price? How to make sure that the infrastructure for the sites can be there, and then stimulate the private investment going out there. And then also, if you cover villages now rurally, public installations, be it schools, being medical centers, etc., make sure they're connected, make sure they use the network, so that the ones who invest the money to provide the coverage gets a return on it also.
Perfect. No, I think affordable network, affordable devices, and affordable spectrum, I think, is a critical ask to ensure that we make the services, AI applications available to our masses. So completely agree with you over there. Harshit, if I may come to you, we talked about ROI and making everything affordable. Is there any, if you could maybe throw insights on how can the existing infrastructure be made more cost efficient, more, are there any innovations around those areas which India can leverage? That will help us a long way in leveraging the existing infrastructure itself.
That's, I think, well-placed question at this moment, because we have talked about the importance of connectivity. We have talked about what to do to connect the rural India, and we have talked about the infrastructure a lot. But what about the existing infrastructure that we have? How can we utilize it at this point? Okay. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we don't have to dig more fiber where it's already existing. And the simple solution, I have a one-word solution for that, that is WDM. And the definition or the full form of that word is wavelength division multiplexing. Maybe some of you guys are aware about it and some are not. So I will explain that with a very simple imaginative example. Okay, let's suppose this fiber that you have on inside is like a highway, and you are driving a car that is one link that is going through it. And what if I say that highway is infinite? You can have infinite number of cars inside. There is no limitation, there is no rule to that. The only rule is that you cannot have the same color of car. That is the wavelength. So you can have multiple wavelength at the same time flowing through the same highway. It's infinite. So what you can do basically, you can multiplex. You can use those different legacy cars that you have, color them, and run them on the same highway instead of using multiple highways. So what you're doing right now is that you are basically freeing up the fiber that is already there. And by doing that, you are not only increasing the bandwidth of that highway. So suppose you have 10 1G links, and what you can do, you can multiplex those all those 10 1G links and multiplex them to on a single fiber. Earlier it was using 10 pair of fibers. Now it is using one pair of fiber. But it doesn't stops there. If you move to the DWDM, that is the dense wavelength division multiplexing, you can even multiplex 100 of those links. And again, the data rate is not a restriction. It can be 100G. Suppose, I mean, can you imagine, 100 links of 100G on a pair of fiber. It's already, I think it's more than enough, what we need. So there's a lot of interesting ways, but the one that I know, and I'll take this opportunity to market my company as well. So anybody who's more interested and want to know more about the product and solution around it can visit us at our booth, Huberschuner. And so.
Thanks, Harshit, for explaining in a layman's language using the highway and the car analogy. It makes a lot of sense. Maybe extending the similar thought, he explained about fiber innovation. Ashwini, if you can maybe share what kind of operational innovations have you been working on the tower side or infra, as an infra co to kind of maximize the existing infrastructure and make sure that that's being leveraged to the maximum extent.
Yeah. So basically, if I look at from a micro level, so when I spoke earlier, so I spoke about, lots of things changing in the digital infrastructure space. Okay, and if I try to see another industry where similar revolution kind of changes are happening, so I find it to be a power sector. Okay, because of this green energy and lot of other things, and also the requirement of power increasing with all these AIs and so much compute coming in. So there are these two industries which are seeing a sea change in last 5, 6, 7, 10 years, and the anticipation is that this will keep on changing in the same speed. And fortunately or unfortunately, our towers are a combination of these two industries. So on one side, we are a digital infrastructure provider. On other side, we are users of the power industry. So we use so much power on each of our this thing. So I think the biggest scope of innovation on digital infrastructure, kind of side is that the way we are using the power now. Okay, diesel generators, VLRA batteries. So how do we innovate to, use better quality of batteries, lesser diesel, not only from a cost perspective, but from a sustainability perspective also. More and more solar, whether it is site-specific solar or, as this industry is also moving, we are already talking about open access, solar and all those kind of things. So I think this is one space where I feel that, in next, already so much innovation is happening, but the acceleration and the speed at which it is going to happen is going to see a tremendous change in the coming years. And simply because the industry to which we are customer is also like, our industry and, doing so many innovations and so many changes. I think the other thing is, so basically we are trying to create infrastructure for AI, but we believe that this AI into our industry, specifically tower industry, is going to change the way we run our sites. Okay, and I will give a kind of seeing from Harshit, try to give a very, very simple example. So today, we design our sites based on the load on that site. How much electrical load will be there in that site, whether there are 2 operators, 3 operators, which all technologies they are using, which all spectrums they are using. But because we do not have so much intelligence with us, we tend to neglect so many factors, which impact overall running and operations of our site. For example, the weather of that place. Whether we are putting to give an extreme example, whether we are putting a site in a, let's say Srinagar or Jaisalmer. Okay, we will still design the site in a similar way, though because of the weather conditions, the design of the site could be much, much, much different. There you may not need as much cooling as you may need in Jaisalmer or, in a hot place. Similarly, the other parameter which is so very critical is the grid availability. Okay, so in our country, we have places where we have almost, kind of 24 hours grid availability, and still have places in rural India where grid availability is, let's say 12 hours, 13 hours, 14 hours on an average. Now, if we can use all these informations as a AI input to us, so not only from an operation standpoint, but from a designing of the site standpoint, we can become so very efficient, and then when we are operating it and we are getting all these, real-time information, which is backed by the AI. Okay, I think, there is so much improvements that can be done on the Atar side, and we have already, started seeing, these things happening, and, we starting to implement, on one side, starting to build networks for AI, on other side, start consuming that also. So that's how I look at it. And the third thing which I find, from a tower industry standpoint, which has a large potential for us to, kind of do lot of efficiency improvement and all, is the digital twinning of our towers, of our sites. Can we, use drones or other mechanisms, to avoid, site visits, instead of, our people going to site and, in so many difficult, terrains, he talked about, there are certain places where you cannot go to the site. So can all these things be automated using the drone technologies and softwares, where we can get the digital image of our site, and whatever we want to do on that site, we can do it from our back end. So those are some of the very, very exciting things that we are looking in our industry, where, our efficiency and our efficacy, with which we are able to, serve our customers, can be improved.
No, brilliant insights. In fact, Ashwini, similar to what you're saying, just want to share one example of how NHAI, our National Highways Authority of India, is also leveraging an AI vision analytics to using drone technology to monitor remotely, ensure there is maintenance and everything is kind of proactively managed rather than a reactive approach. So there's so much that's possible with AI that is currently not being leveraged. Maybe since we're on top of the hour, John, maybe my last question to you. Again, given your global experience, we've seen interest from both our public sector and private sector in scaling up the digital infrastructure. How have you seen some of the global practices? Can you share any insights on global practices? So now, this public-private partnership has been successful, and where the organizations have come together, the governments have come together to create this infrastructure.
No, I think it's so important that we have the public sector and the private sector working together. 3.4 billion people is the number of people globally not connected. Now, more than half of the population is, but 3.4 billion. And that number is simply too big for any one company, one country, one organization to solve on their own. So we have to come together. And I think some of the topics that came up just now are perfect examples. I think the issue of, if you look at who are those people, they're disproportionately rural. They're disproportionately poor. They're disproportionately women, right? So these are challenges we need to be partnering with others to try to address. And I think one of the biggest barriers to access is, and most of them are covered by mobile broadband, they just are not using it. So the reason they're not using it is either they can't afford it or they don't have the skills to use it. And there's a huge role for industry and government to play together in that. And the biggest barrier for the affordability is the device. the device is simply too expensive for certain parts of the population. So one, yes, look at how you can drive scale to get a lower cost device, but progress is being made there. Up to 30% of the cost of a device is often tax and import duty. Well, the government could solve that tomorrow if you work closely with the industry, especially if you're targeting lower end devices, right? That's something that they could do. And also, I think there's a huge opportunity on skills development. But I think the other important thing, and it came up on the spectrum point as well, is connectivity is a regulated sector for the most part. So it's hugely dependent on the relationship between government and industry. And we need to be cognizant that the digital situation in India today is not the situation it was 10 years ago. It's hugely a product of changes in regulation and policy that allowed scale, investment, removal of burdens so that more people are connected. So if your policies are aimed at connecting more people, sometimes you have to take short-term hits to make the long-term gains. And I think, lastly, of course, on the spectrum piece that I was mentioning, spectrum is a national resource. It is nationally licensed, often for too much money, but that's a side note. The availability of the spectrum is key. And I mean, I think India is a great example of leadership in this space. And I think just the past week, we saw a consultation launched about looking at low frequency spectrum, which will help expand rural connectivity and capacity in rural connectivity. And we also saw mid-band upper 6 gigahertz spectrum being examined to supplement that much needed mid-band spectrum range for 5G and beyond. Because if we don't have all of those tools in place, that digital divide of today will be an AI divide tomorrow. And as I said up front, most of those people are in the rural areas. So I think we have to work together.
Brilliant. I think this this summarizes, how the power of both public and private can come together to achieve joint objectives. So, I mean, I think just to summarize on this panel, clearly AI has a big impact and potential to uplift our rural India, be it agriculture, education, healthcare. There's so many use cases that can really create a positive impact on our society. But I think the infrastructure needs investment, whether we're talking about computing power, edge infrastructure, policy interventions, a lot of financial models that you talked about. I think those, I'm sure the government will positively be looking into some of these models to make it more feasible, more attractive for the private sector to operate in. And lastly, I think it's really heartening to see how some of the innovations that are happening on the network side, infrastructure, fiber side, which can enable organizations and countries to leverage some of the infrastructure, and rather than starting everything from ground zero. So with that, I would like to thank our esteemed panelists here. Thank you. This was really an insightful session. Not sure if we have time for questions or... Okay, so maybe I'll just open the floor to the audience if there are any questions. Okay, I guess the session was insightful enough.